It's time for the Bleed Los Podcast with your hosts, Alonso and Juan, Alicia Del Valle, and the babyface gimmick in the sky, Roger.
BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
And we are back with another episode of the Bleed Los podcast, a weekly rewind edition for the show. Me and Steve Webb here, fellow Dodgers beat writer, are on the show today to recap the Dodgers' exciting week, especially rebounding after the San Diego series where they lost 2 out of 3. They rebound nicely, taking series against our arch rival San Francisco Giants, winning 2 out of 3 in that one, and the conclusion of the Cincinnati Reds series where the Dodgers, after losing game 1, take 3 of 4, and they get a nice walk-off win for Shohei Ohtani, the first of his Dodgers career in what I expect to be many more over the next 10 seasons. But Steve, it's been an exciting week. It's been a lot of, there's been a lot of moves, a lot of turnover. Some fan favorites, unfortunately, are no longer on the team right now. But what do you make of just briefly of just how
the week
crazy
in
this
general?
Week has been?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was there was a little blip there in the middle on Wednesday and Thursday where things were not great to be a Dodger fan on those 2 days, but the rest of the week was very, very good baseball being played. Like the offense to pick it up a little bit more, but you hate to need walk-offs, right? And I'm glad we got one today, but hopefully there can be more 8-2 wins than 3-2 ones.
Yeah, you mentioned the offense kind of being a little inconsistent, especially on Wednesday and then Thursday night. It seems like the Dodgers hitters just weren't there. All in all, Mookie Betts also gets a night off one of those games, kind of throwing off a little bit of how the lineup is constructed. They're playing 13 games in 13 days.
Right.
So
and the Dodgers playing a night game in one city and then playing a night game on the next night in the next city. That's never easy. No travel time. They have to get off a plane and get back on a plane and get right to the stadium as soon as they wake up the next morning. It's not easy. So
yeah, it's not easy at all. And, it's also especially harder coming off a series which they lost again to the San Diego Padres. We talked about this in our live this past Thursday. But the Dodgers, they kind of just were outmatched in San Diego, outpitched and outhit over there. And then they come into San Francisco. You really don't know what you're going to get into over there just because, the ballpark, the weather, the atmosphere, and then the way the team was slumping in those 3 games in San Diego. Dodgers rebound really good. They get 2 wins. They threw a bullpen game out there that kept them in the lead, kept them in the running for most of that night. It could have been a winnable game, but they end up dropping that finale. But what do you think of the Giants series?
Eliezer Hernandez. He did go.
He made that turn into from a bullpen game to him.
But we appreciate what he did for us there.
But besides that final game, what are your takeaways kind of from that series? It seems like the Dodgers have kind of dominated the Giants in almost all assets of the game.
Yeah, that was a pretty convincing win in those first 2 games of the series. I think they figured on Wednesday that why push it? It's early in the year. We could throw Glasnow on regular rest, but we've talked about Glasnow managing his innings already. It's something that the Dodgers have to be aware of, and it just didn't make sense to just push it at this point in the season, especially since you've already won the series. So that I don't mind what they did with that last game, and it was kind of like you're playing with house money. You might as well bring up somebody and just take a flyer on them and see how they do. But those first 2 wins were very impressive. And I mean, granted, this Giants team, which is not that great to begin with, was really not that great at the moment, right? That they've lost their starting center fielder, and that really showed. I mean, that hit on that Will Smith got in the extra inning game. It looked like Luis Matos was kind of alligator arming it there at the end and just let the thing sail over his head. So I think you're spot on that it was just a strong win all the way around those 2 games and exciting baseball and certainly they didn't. They got good pitching, but they didn't need it because they were hitting pretty well there.
Yeah, the Giants are reeling right now, and this is a team that came in with lofty expectations, maybe not to win the division in 2024, but at least make a postseason push. And right now they're hovering between, second to last place or kind of third place in the division, and that's just really not going to cut it in San Francisco, which is a team, a couple years ago, they beat the Dodgers in the National League West. They won 107 games, and it just really hasn't been the same for them since. And I thought they had a really good offseason. I thought a lot of their moves made sense. They filled up holes, but just those players, like you mentioned, Jung-Hoo Lee, he's out for the remainder of the season. That's a huge blow for them.
Yeah,
Matt Chapman offensively hasn't really worked over there, and he also is one of the leaders in errors for the league, I believe, as a third baseman, which is just crazy, a guy that's won the Platinum Glove.
Considering how great he was in Oakland.
Yeah, and then you just add in the fact that it seems like back-to-back years they're not getting a lot out of their pitching. They kind of struck gold with Jordan Hicks, transforming him from a reliever into a starting pitcher. But even Logan Webb, he's been very shaky this year, and you can only dig yourself into a hole so far into a season. And I get that it's still early. It's late May right now. We haven't even hit Memorial Day yet. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers, as we speak right now, the Padres are currently playing, but they have an commanding 8-game lead over the second-place Padres, and then it goes above that over the Diamondbacks and the Giants. So if they want to stay in postseason contention, the National League, after those division leaders, it's very, very competitive, and you're not going to have to finish. You're going to have to get at least 85 wins, and they're not on pace for that at all.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that I think at this point in the season, there's really starting to be some separation between the top of the National League and the teams that are just hoping that they'll get into that last wild card spot. You've got Dodgers, Phillies, Braves, and we'll throw the Brewers and Cubs in there too, right? And those are the only teams that are really playing like consistently good baseball, and the others are really just kind of, they'll have a little run and then they'll lose a few games, and it's a lot of 500 teams. That's what's left. So you've got let's see, Phillies, Braves, Dodgers, Cubs, Brewers. That's 5. So there's one spot left for all those other teams, and I don't know if both the Cubs and Brewers will make it all the way to the end. So there might be another spot opening up, but I don't see anybody displacing the top 4. So there's really 2 spots open for the postseason, and right now nobody wants it.
Yeah, and the Dodgers, they continue to dominate the Giants this year. Their only loss was that series finale game against Logan Webb, and like I said, the Dodgers made that very winnable. The pitching was good that game. It's just the offense fell flat from the series finale in that series, and then the series opener against the Reds. But moving on from the Giants series, Dodgers, like I said, took 2 of 3 up in San Francisco. It's always good to get some wins up there. But then they returned home to face the Cincinnati Reds, who a lot of people around baseball had a lot of high hopes for. They ended up getting a lot of injuries before the season starts, got a couple suspensions thrown in there for some PED use, and the Reds are kind of sitting at under 500 entering this series, and now they're further under 500 after losing 3 of 4 against the Dodgers. Especially at how we saw the Reds kind of own the Dodgers, to put it nicely, last year, just with their style of play with young athletic players, especially L.A. De La Cruz, who is just a phenomenal guy. He knows how to play defense, offense, and he can steal pretty much any base he wants to. But what were your takeaways from this Red series, especially, that walk-off win today?
Well, I mean, I think there were good things the last 3 days. I mean, the best thing about the last 3 days is, well, I think the only time De La Cruz was on base was in that 10th inning on Sunday's walk-off winner, and he didn't even move from there. So I was kind of stunned that he didn't try to steal in that situation, but he didn't really have a shot. The thing that I liked was, he got 4 hits and stole, 17 bases on the first day. But after that, De La Cruz was a complete non-entity the rest of the series. They figured out how to pitch him. They knew that he has a lot of chase. They turned him around to the right side where he's not as good a lot. And he wasn't the same player that he was the first game of the last 3. That was number one. The good thing on the pitching side is they made their adjustments and really, neutralized De La Cruz as an issue. And the rest of the Reds just don't have, there's not a lot of pop in that lineup. Will Benson can hit a home run from time to time. Spencer Steer can hit a home run from time to time. But these guys are not, 30, 40 home run guys. So once De La Cruz is sort of out of the picture, you're not going to see the Reds scoring a whole lot of runs. And how many runs did they score the last 3 days? Not many.
Yeah. And then that first game was when Cruz was pretty much primarily on base, almost had 5 stolen bases in a single game. After that, he ended up going like 0 for 9 or 0 for 10 with a couple Ks thrown in there, and he was pretty much a non-factor. Day. So I think that kind of credit to the Dodgers for keeping him off base. I think a big takeaway that I could see from, just how that first game went is kind of a problem that's still following them a little bit from last season, and that's just either the pitcher's ability to hold these speedy runners on or the inability of our catchers to throw those runners out. And I know with Cruz, it's extremely hard just because he is one of the fastest runners in baseball. I believe he's either 99th or 100th percentile in sprint speed for Major League Baseball. But it is a little bit concerning because these are the type of things that are going to make the difference come October. And as we all know that we've been saying, that's all that the Dodgers are going to be judged on this year. And we saw last year with a young, energetic Diamondbacks team making it in. A team like the Reds or a team with a couple players like that the Reds have could be a difference for the Dodgers moving forward. And I think Tyler Glasnow alluded to it in his post game. He was very, very unpleased with his performance, and he even mentioned his inability to hold on Cruz was a pretty much a factor of why they lost that game. And I think it's good that he's taking credit for it, and that him and the pitching staff and the catchers, they have to work as a collective unit to hold these guys on. Do you still see some issues, at least moving forward, with, trying to hold these guys on, especially no one even just seems to do pitch outs anymore, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, especially with De La Cruz because he's got such happy feet over there. I think, Will Smith's pop time is pretty good. So I think it's really an issue before the ball reaches the catcher. So I think they need to work on cleaning that up a little bit. And that with the only 2 disengagements you can have 2 throws over, it really makes it hard to control the pitching, the running game from the pitching side. So these young athletic teams are going to, they see kind of a weakness in the Dodgers, and they say if you want to beat the Dodgers, you got to run, and so the Dodgers have to be ready to try to figure out how to neutralize that.
Yeah, and I think the other takeaway from this series is Walker Buehler has made 3 starts so far, and this one was probably his best start since his return. It obviously was his best start. He had a shutout outing. I believe he went 6 innings in that start. We've been kind of talking about Walker Buehler these past 2 to 3 weeks. What were you going to expect when he returns? Has, kind of hit or miss starts against the Marlins and the Padres, with some outlining positives that we could take away from each of those starts, and then some negatives as well. But it seemed like he really put it all together in this start. You're watching Walker Buehler. You're seeing him, how he's attacking these Cincinnati Reds hitters, especially these young aggressive hitters. I think the big thing for him was just to try to get ahead in the count, just because once they're down 0-1, he has so many pitches to select from to get these guys out. So what were you seeing from Buehler in this recent start?
Well, I think you hit it on the head when you use that word aggressive, because the Padres are a much more disciplined lineup, and Buehler didn't help by getting behind most of the Padre hitters all day in that second start. The first start, I kind of, there were some good things, some bad things. It didn't bother me, his first start. The second start was a little rougher, and I think the reason is he wasn't getting ahead, and this time he really, what did he have, like 70% first pitch strikes or something like that. So it was a welcome return, and he was just dotting stuff there. He was on the black all day long, So yeah, it's obviously the best we've seen Walker Buehler in a long, long time. I don't know if I'd go as far as Eric Karras did and say it's the best he's ever pitched in his life, but it was a very impressive outing for sure.
Yeah, I think if you look at going back to 2022, because not many people remember, his ERA was over 4 that year before he got shelved with the Tommy John. So I think this is his best start in almost probably 2 collective years pitching, and he kind of showcased everything. I've said it off air with a lot of the other contributors on the site. I think the one things that I see that's particularly an issue for Buehler is his fastball just looks really flat, and I'm very intrigued. I'm very optimistic that he's hitting, 95, 96 miles per hour consistently. However, big league hitters are bred to hit those types of pitches. If there's no spin, or if there's no rising to that fastball, there's no some type of movement, and it's just going to go straight on a line, that's where you can get kind of into trouble. And I feel like those first 2 starts against the Marlins and the Padres, if these hitters were sitting fastball, they were getting good, clean hits off of it. I think this start, he actually turned into a pitcher's pitcher and started incorporating a lot of his breaking stuff. He had that sinker working. The pitch he really had working was the knuckle curve. He got a couple Reds hitters off balance with those swings throughout that night. But I think the fastball is just the biggest issue. I have no idea what you could pretty much place on it. I've written about, how he had to transform his entire body. He's gained a little bit of weight to put some extra muscle onto his arm. Maybe he changed his grip. Maybe he was one of those pitchers that ended up using some type of sticky stuff to help him in those previous seasons, and now he has to adapt to that. And he's also never pitched with the pitch clock as well. This is his first full season doing that since he wasn't available at all last year. So there's a variety of factors. I'm sure he won't give the answers to what he's changing in his repertoire, but it's just something that I've noticed from year on to now. And then even looking at the advanced metrics, everything still looks the same. Me and Juan were going back and forth like, well, what's his spin rate? Like what's his fastball spin rate? And it actually had an uptick for this year compared to 2022. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just something that he needs a couple more starts to kind of pinpointing that fastball a little bit more. But it just seems like major league hitters are just going to be on top of that every time he throws it.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. It's interesting because I think, it's small sample size theater right now, right? And, the first 2 starts, everybody overreacted and said, oh, woe is me, Walker Buehler is not what he used to be. He'll never be an elite pitcher ever again. And then after Sunday, everybody was quickly deleting those tweets and saying, Walker Buehler is back. He'll be a Cy Young candidate for sure. So I think the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle, and we'll just have to see which one is he closer to. I'm going to say, I'd like to see a good 10 starts out of him before I make any judgments about what we've got here.
Yeah.
I mean, he was against a very young, very aggressive team, and he dominated them.
Yeah. I think
His
this
first two
entire
starts were
start
less successful.
I think this entire start was a very good step in the right direction for Bueller. Kind of maybe you need to face these bad teams to kind of see what you have working and what you don't have working, and then just putting away hitters. Because even at the end of the day, the Reds, they still have a lot of good a lot of good players. They were a fringe playoff team last year. They have lofty expectations this year to potentially make the postseason. So I think there's a lot of positives we can take from this. Obviously, if the Dodgers want to succeed and get to where they want to go, they envision Bueller being a key contributor in that success. So looking forward to his next start, seeing how he can take from this start against the Reds to his next start. But moving on to the next thing that we're going to talk about, it's probably going to take a lot of our conversation of this episode, and that is just the Dodgers roster move frenzy that they've been going on this past couple days. Regular season Dodgers baseball, they always make, changes in the pitching and the bullpen, calling up guys from AAA, taking flyers on guys from other teams for some cash considerations. But the two big ones I want to talk about right now is James Outman being optioned down to AAA OKC, Jason Heyward being activated, and then Miguel Vargas, who I mentioned a couple weeks ago, being recalled, taking that left field spot in a platoon situation for the Dodgers for the time being. Out of those things, we can probably lead off with the Outman, just because he is a friend of the show. A lot of people were high on this guy. Year 2, his sophomore season, just hasn't gotten off to the right start. Were you shocked that the Dodgers decided to send down Outman, or did you kind of see the writing on the walls?
Yeah, I think really, given if you're going to put Hayward back on the team, the only move that made sense was, for now anyway, was to put Outman in the on the bus to OKC. He really, just didn't. There wasn't even a moment all year where you felt like he put together a string of 3 or 4 games where he was playing well consistently. It was just a lot of strikeouts and a lot of just in between. He didn't know if he was sitting fastball. He didn't know he was looking for a curve. He just was all over the place with his batting. And there's a lot of sad and slow walks back to the dugout. So it doesn't surprise me that he's sent down. I hope he can turn it around in Oklahoma and get things going again, because it just wasn't happening here. And, with Andy Pajes, who had a good game again today, coming up and, contributing, got a home run today to start off the scoring. I can't see an argument for keeping Outman on the lineup. I mean, we'll talk about it at some length perhaps later, but I mean, they can't get rid of Chris Taylor right now. They're kind of shackled to him, and unless they do a couple of maneuvers that would be perhaps something that they're going to consider. But right now, I think the move is send Outman down, put him in the lineup every day in Oklahoma, and see if he can work his way out of this in a less high stakes setting. And maybe he can get on a bender and then come on back up. But for now, he's just not doing the team any good.
Yeah, I think the move made sense because you're activating a left-handed hitter in Heyward, and then you kind of are going to start eliminating starts for Outman regardless, because Andy Pajes is an everyday guy, and Jason Heyward, for the most part, is going to be an everyday guy playing primarily against right-handed pitching. And Teoscar Hernandez, I think, has started every single game for the Dodgers this year. So that's your outfield right there. And Pajes, credit to him, he used to be a lot of people thought he was a corner infield or corner outfielder and maybe transitions to a DH. Total body transformation ever since his surgery, and now he's pretty much, I would say, the primary center fielder now, and he's made a lot of good plays out there.
Without Outman, I guess who else is the center fielder?
Yeah, and then Pages, he hits the home run today, and he's just continued to produce, and you can't send him down. You give him his new number, and he's still playing at a high level right now. And Outman, he has played really good defense. He's always had a lot of strikeouts. It's just been his game. Last year he had like over 180 strikeouts for the Dodgers.
Yeah, he was like third in the National League in strikeouts.
And it's still translating to this year. He's still striking out at a high clip, but one of the silver linings at the beginning of the season was like, oh, well, he's making a lot of hard contact. Like some of his outs are line drive outs that are just not dropping where they may drop in like the summer. But he kind of lost all that. Now he just wasn't having any good at-bats. He wasn't walking. He wasn't getting on base. And the Dodgers just kind of divorced their hand. And, you brought up Chris Taylor, but the reason why Outman's easier, to be the corresponding move is because Outman just still has options. He's still on that, that rookie contract, that 6 years of like service time that he still has to get. He's only in year 2, so they can send him down no problem. But I think I really want to get into Chris Taylor because a lot of people were still confused just why the Dodgers didn't, DFA him. And I've explained pretty much candidly why they can't do it, but I'm interested to see, what your thoughts are in the entire process with Chris Taylor, who's still on the active roster.
Well, I mean, I think primarily it's a money thing right now. They just don't want to kiss $30 million goodbye, or whatever the prorated version of $30 million would be, and it's just that they're hoping. It might be a fool's hope right now, but they're hoping that he can get his act together and be a contributing player on this team, which he hasn't really been. I mean, since he was great in 21, 22 and 23 were steps back to be sure. And now here we are in 24 and it's just awful. I can't see them keeping him all year, but maybe they'll figure out something to do with him. I don't know. The old Phantom IL stint might be a thing that put him on the 60-day and just kind of park him somewhere. And but MLB's kind of been cracking down on that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's really hard. And the Taylor situation, it puts the Dodgers in an awkward spot. This is a guy they extended to a contract after that 2021 season, huge part of the postseason run where they ended up falling in the NLCS. But honestly, since he signed that contract extension, he's been a below average hitter. He has an 86 OPS plus in that 2.5 year span since he signed that deal, and he's actually battled a lot of injuries. He's missed a lot of time on the field, and a little bit kind of makes me question if he's battling some type of minor injury that's just lingering at him, that's making his mechanics fall off, just because even when he gets in the batter's box, obviously he's not going to be super confident, just because if you look at his slash line, but he just doesn't look comfortable in the batter's box either. So I think the Dodgers could use that to their advantage at some point when they have to make another roster crunch, when some other players are activated, or maybe James Outman starts lighting the world on fire in AAA and they want to just call him back up. They could obviously think of a way to IL him, and I know what you're saying, Phantom IL. MLB's trying to crack down on that. It seems like the Dodgers are still kind of doing that in a way, just because some of the updates they give us with injuries, we kind of just look at them with a little side eye, like, yeah, we understand it. You want to make that roster move, give up that extra pitcher. The other hard thing with Taylor is that you can't send him down. He's eclipsed that service time in the MLB level where he cannot be sent down to the minor leagues without his consent. And the only player that we've seen that kind of happen to recently was Jose Abreu on the Astros, and he had to agree to it. So that has to be a similar situation.
That's a big union thing too. You can't just send somebody down to the minors.
Yeah, and then in terms of,
this is what Taylor's 10th season of Major League service time.
So that was what I was a little confused on. So I wrote an article a couple weeks ago. I thought since it already had him listed as like 10 years on Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, he still actually doesn't have 10 years service time. So I thought he was already under the 10-5 rights. He will eclipse that next season. So the Dodgers can still trade him if they can find a partner, and he has no ability to veto it. The only part about the 10-5 rights that he does have is that he just can't get, optioned down to the minor leagues, which happens when you eclipse 5 years of MLB service time. So Taylor, you mentioned it's a money thing. It is a money thing. It's very hard to DFA almost $30 million. And even if you are the Los Angeles Dodgers, when you have a player like Chris Taylor, who I know a lot of Dodger fans don't want to hear it, but he has a lot of upside. This is the guy that has a lot of versatility. He used to hit lefties very well. He has a lot of pop. And at the end of the day, he was just really clutch, whether it was offensively or defensively in the postseason. And the Dodgers have stated, this entire offseason with some of the players that they've acquired or reacquired, like Kike Hernandez, they value that right now because they are in a win-now mode for October. How long they let the Chris Taylor experiment go for this entire season, I would say if he's not corrected by the All-Star break, it's really either IL or trade. I don't see them DFAing him, but I also find it hard a team trying to acquire him unless the Dodgers pay a significant portion of his salary. But I feel like the Dodgers would want to get something.
Essentially a DFA with maybe a little kickback. It's tough. I feel for the guy because I've always liked him as a player because he's always come through in the clutch. I wrote an article that's on Dodgers Beat now about Chris Taylor that I put up I think this morning. And it's, kind of recounting all of the big moments that he's had, how he had that big catch in Milwaukee and then he had, he led off the 18 World Series with a home run and then he had 3 home runs in one game in the World Series, I think. And then he, of course, his biggest moment is that walk-off winner against the Cardinals in 21. So, he's got all these moments that, you sort of are holding onto for nostalgia's sake, and you want him to be back in the fold because he has meant a lot to this franchise over the last, half a dozen years. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm doubtful that he'll be on the roster by the end of the year, but we'll see.
Yeah, it is a waiting game. I believe the Dodgers are going to still try to get him some runaway, but if he doesn't take off, it's another big decision that the Dodgers are going to have to make. However, before we segue to the end of the show, one of the players that they did recall was Miguel Vargas, who everybody knows was the opening day second baseman for the Dodgers last year. Did not have a good first full rookie season, ended up getting optioned down to the minors at the trade deadline, not to be seen again for the rest of the season. But as I've mentioned before in previous lives and previous articles, he has been tearing it up in AAA OKC right now. I figured eventually the Dodgers would give him the call. Interestingly enough, he has started every single game in left field for OKC. Coming in for the injured Muncy right now, there was maybe a little bit of question mark. Oh, does he shift back to third? Dave Roberts assured that he's going to be, the games he starts, he will be specifically playing left field. So take 2 for Vargas in the majors. What are your expectations, and do you think it's a roster move that'll last a long time, or do you think it's just for a couple weeks?
We'll keep an eye on it. I mean, he didn't cover himself in glory in left field when he ran into Andy Pagas on Saturday, did he? But we'll see. Hopefully, they can work out that communication issue. I mean, that's a very young outfield there. One guy's got 20 games of service, the other guy's got a half a year. So it's not exactly the murderer's row out there. So we'll see. I'm hopeful Vargas. I mean, I hope Vargas does not turn into, and I don't want to use this example, but I will anyway. Don't turn into what we saw from Gavin Lux. Now, I think Gavin Lux is going to come back eventually, and he's been playing better lately. But I mean, Gavin Lux tore it up in AAA and has never come close to that in the big leagues. I mean, this is I think his fourth year up here, or some fifth year maybe. Depending on how you count last year. So I hope he's not just a AAA only star. He really had a rough go of it last time, and we'll see how things go. I hope it would be nice to have somebody that could, at least be there from. I don't know. I think a lot of it, and seeing how Mookie Betts played shortstop this weekend, I think they got to figure out some other strategy for the infield. And if that means moving Mookie back to the outfield, I don't know if it does. But I mean, Vargas at least could play infield. I don't know. I don't see a real future for that infield. It's just not a big league championship infield. So I don't know. Mookie has shown moments where he's great, and I know we're supposed to be talking about Vargas, but I think what happens to Mookie is key to whether or not Vargas stays on the team. I would like Vargas to at least get good enough to where we can count on him wherever he is on the field. So it'll be interesting to see what he's got this time around. Hopefully he's a little more mature, ready to play, because it was not a great 2023 for him up here.
Yeah, I think if he gets off to a strong start, similar to what we saw with Pages, or even somewhat a little bit less than that, I think when I look at it, if they really view him just as an exclusive outfielder in left field in a platoon role, I really think he may be auditioning to be Chris Taylor's replacement if he's not here on season's end. I'm trying to look at the Dodgers' holes. You mentioned Mookie Betts may being a question mark at shortstop. Does he go back to second? Does he go back to the outfield? And then I'm trying to look at, all right, well, what do the Dodgers have? And Miguel Vargas is there. He is a guy that is a doubles guy. He is an 800 OPS guy in the minors. He knows how to hit a baseball. I think he was a little bit, plagued with that, that arm, or what was it, that finger injury that plagued him all spring training where he couldn't swing the bat. I think that probably lingered with him the entire season, delaying his start kind of. But if you're a non-fan of Chris Taylor, you're probably rooting for Vargas to take his spot, and I would say that is very possible. And that's just because I'm looking at the trade market, and I really don't see many teams selling because I mentioned in our chat the other day with all our writers saying everybody that's around that 84 win mark thinks they have a chance to not only make the playoffs but make the World Series. So it's going to make the trade.
And I think people who are still on the Willy Adames train have got to get off that train, because the Brewers are not.
I was off of it. I was never on it, and people saying it, but I said the Brewers are winning their division right now.
Give that up right now. Maybe if the Brewers had tanked this year, if they were playing like I don't know, the Marlins or something like that, maybe you could get him, but you're not getting him if the Brewers are in first place. They're not. They've already had to face the wrath of their fans for trading Josh Hader at the deadline when they were still competing for a playoff spot. They would not do that again, I don't think.
Yeah. So I think it's just going to be it's going to be up to Vargas. If Vargas wants to stay, he has to show it and prove it at this level and force the Dodgers' hand. Force the Dodgers' hand like they did with Andy Pages. If you want to stay up here at this level, he's already got his big league number. If he just wants to hit the ball and show what we saw from him in the minors and then in spring training, he could very well be replacing somebody and taking somebody's job. So I think it's just a matter of time will tell. How long Muncy's out is probably, how much leeway they're going to give Vargas. Once Muncy comes back, if Vargas isn't hitting, then there you go. That's your corresponding roster move right there. But other than that, any closing thoughts, Steve, before we end the show?
Well, this was always going to be kind of a tough little stretch here, because with 13 games in 13 days is and I think they've navigated it pretty well, to be honest. The bullpen's holding up. Blake Trining continues to put up zeros. Alex Vesia, he did walk that guy in Sunday's game, but he's been fantastic. And we need to start giving love to some of these lower level leverage bullpen guys, because they have been holding down the fort. It's been really remarkable. So I think the kind of the games on Wednesday and Thursday were not great, but I think overall you're just seeing the Dodgers picking up steam, and it'll be nice if they could have a nice little series win against the Diamondbacks and put a little more distance between us and them. And I don't want to start selling any championship hats yet, but you could be in a position where they're 10 games up before Memorial Day hits, because they're practically there already, and we've got another 10 days of this month left. So things are moving along very well. We just need to kind of strengthen the bench, and I think figure out who's going to be on the bench going forward, and who's going to be finding another place to play. But I mean, the thing that's interesting is, I don't know if we can get any buddy at the trade deadline that we want, but just how many trade pieces the Dodgers have right now that they've been showcasing. I mean, I don't know who they're going to trade, but if you just look at the young starting pitching that we've had just in the last week, we've gone this whole show and now talked about how great Gavin Stone's been. And that's another guy that it'll be interesting to see what they do with him once you get Kershaw and maybe D. May coming back toward the tail end of the season. There's going to be a lot of potential trade pieces that can maybe entice a good bat to fill out the bench a little bit better.
Yeah. And all in all, pretty much everything you've gone on and said is, I don't think the Dodgers have played their peak baseball or their best baseball as a collective unit. Some players are hot while some players are cold. So I think we're going to get to those days in summer where everything is clicking and then this team may look unstoppable. But there still is holes. The trade deadline, it is getting closer now. We are about to enter June. We're going to start hearing the rumor mill, heat up. We're going to see a lot more players' names that are thrown out there. And the Dodgers, just due to the circumstances that they're in, they are in World Series or bust mode. They're going to be linked to a lot of those players, and it's going to be an interesting time. It always is around June and July, especially for writers on Dodgers Beat, where we kind of throw names at a wall and hopefully something sticks for an article. But the Dodgers do have some needs. They haven't played their best baseball yet, and yet they still have an 8-game lead in the National League West, the largest lead in any division in baseball right now.
We're doing all this without a closer, so that's even better.
Even better. And
so we'll hopefully come back soon, Evan Phillips.
Yeah, and then that'll about do it for this episode of the Bleed Los Podcast, this weekly rewind edition. The Dodgers, for this next week, they have a set that they're kicking off today, if you're listening, against the Arizona Diamondbacks, and another NL West matchup that'll conclude the 13 games in 13 days and the final home series before they kick it back and go head to Cincinnati to re-up with them again and going back-to-back Sunday games with the Reds. So it'll be a great week of Dodgers baseball. Hopefully they can stat pad that lead there. But I am Cody Snavely. That is Steve Webb. And be sure to subscribe, have the notifications on. We're going to have a lot of content these next couple weeks, especially for those home series. And just be sure to check out the website as well, because we have been pumping out pretty much articles every day. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of debates, and we would just love everybody's opinions on what they think they should do for the Dodgers and what their opinions are for these players. So other than that, I'll see you on the next one.
Hasta la vista, Dodger fans.
This episode has been brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here.